What are the best multi-class archetypes in Pathfinder Second Edition? Which ones are they? Haven't I already done this video? No, that was a top 7. Pay attention! This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder Second Edition. In this video chapter, I've given myself the ridiculous task at looking at every multi-class archetype in Pathfinder 2e and throwing them into a tier list. As already mentioned in my totally legit intro, I've done a similar top 7 multi-class dedications video already, and it'll help if you watch that one first as I go over the basics of those archetypes there. And as there's almost 30 of these to go through, I'm not going to dwell on the base class or go into the mechanics of each archetype, though I will try to mention the class features that these archetypes miss out on from the base class. As of this video, we're closing in on 4,000 subs, but my analytics show me that roughly 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed, which is crazy. If you want to see more Pathfinder content like this, please take a second to hit that subscribe button, and thanks very much for watching. So let's grab skill mastery from an archetype for performance to start the music. So, I will indeed be skipping the initial explanation of how archetypes work in Pathfinder 2e, and I will just encourage you to go watch my previous video on the matter linked on screen now. And I'm just going to jump into my criteria for how I'm judging these multi-class archetypes. As this is a tier list, S tier will be the best, all the way down to D tier, which will be the worst. And as per usual, I will be ignoring rarities. The uncommon and rare archetypes are all fair game. As for requirements to access the archetype, such as needing +2 strength for example, this will only be lightly considered, as the free archetype variant rule has an optional mode where you can remove those requirements entirely. Yeah, I know not everyone plays with free archetype, but those requirements are very small anyway. Some of these archetypes will be very niche, and some of them will be broadly usable, and they will be judged exactly for those merits, meaning if one is incredibly niche, it may still get an S tier, but I will mention why it's getting an S tier and vice versa. Aside from that, one of my main criteria for judgment here is going to be how well the archetype represents the class that it's from initially, i.e. is a fighter archetype good at being similar to a fighter class, etc. The next criteria will generally just be how good the archetype is overall and how useful it's going to be, niche or not. The last criteria will be, on average, how good the archetype's feats are. As this is a tier list, it's entirely going to be my opinion. I do have a lot of experience with the system, but still, ultimately, this is going to be mostly subjective from a GM's perspective mainly, meaning that these rankings are not definitive. I may think a class is good day 1 and then decide it's terrible on day 2. That's just the nature of tier lists. As of the release of this video, there's 27 classes to get through, so I'm not going to get into all that much detail on what each archetype gives you. I'll mention how they differ from the main class, but I'll be flashing images of each archetype on screen anyway, so you can read for yourself what you get upon initially taking it. This does mean, however, that prior knowledge roughly on how these classes work is going to be needed to make sense of this video chapter. Without further ado, let's dive in, going alphabetically. The Alchemist dedication requires an intelligence of +2. First off, this is arguably one of the most versatile archetypes in the entire system. Getting some free daily consumables is pretty amazing for most classes, honestly, both in and out of combat, but this is one of those archetypes that does require feats to get the most out of it, even if the initial dip is decent anyway. You're going to want advanced alchemy, for example, ASAP, because this allows you to make non-versatile vile alchemical concoctions that last all day rather than just a round. And you'll want alchemical power at 12 too, so you can use your class DC instead of item DC, and for more vials per day, grab voluminous vials at 6. Regardless, getting to trigger weaknesses, chug mutagens, and even heal people is all great considering they're free, whether you take the extra feats or not. The Alchemist archetype grants a frankly ridiculous amount of utility to literally any class that has a free hand and the actions to drink or throw things. Sadly, you'll never get the field research subclass option from this archetype, but it's still quite strong. I'm going for A tier. It's fundamentally brilliant for utility, though it requires a bit of system knowledge to squeeze the most out of it. If you have a hand free generally and you're looking for more versatility both in and out of combat, whether that's for heals or triggering weaknesses, etc., that's what the Alchemist archetype is for. The Animist dedication requires a wisdom of +2. This gives you a single apparition +2 common cantrips from the divine list as a prepared caster, and when you start grabbing basic spellcasting, you can start throwing in your bonded apparition spells in your normally divine only spell slots. Unfortunately, you're never going to gain access to the focus spells from the apparition, and like for most spellcaster archetypes, it's a bit of a slow burn to gain access to all of your other spells. It does get a couple of cool, interesting feats in there, but nothing too crazy, sadly, as you're never able to pick feats with the wandering trait. Channeler's Stance, though, for example, is pretty awesome. I think I'm going to go with B tier, as it's relatively solid due to Animist's good feats, but it's not going to blow your mind with raw, unfiltered power. If you're looking for some somewhat interesting feats and potentially being able to deal a bit more damage with your spells, or you just want more spells in general, that's what the Animist archetype is all about. The Barbarian dedication's a bit demanding, requiring a +2 in strength and constitution. So taking this archetype immediately gives you the rage action, as if you recently perused the current price of cheese, though you do take a -1 penalty while enraged and can't do actions with the concentrate trait, which is kind of a big deal. But you do gain temp HP equal to your level plus con mod, and you do 2 additional damage on melee strikes, half for agile. And any class aside from a guardian, at least currently as this video is released, can start taking Barbarian resiliency to increase their health by 3 for each Barbarian archetype feat they have, which is really freaking good. And of course you can start grabbing some Barbarian feats, and you do get their instinct ability if you grab it at level 6 onwards. This means that later on your rage gets rather strong indeed. So I'm going to go for B tier, just because if you're purely martial focused, this could actually be rather strong, so long as you find a way to mitigate that AC penalty. Also, Kineticist mixed with the Elemental Barbarian is pretty awesome and is literally built for that synergy. So if you don't care about having any concentrate actions whatsoever, such as being 100% martial focused, this is solid so long as you can forgive the AC penalty. Also, the heal spell does not have the concentrate trait. Just bear that one in mind. The Bard dedication requires a +2 in charisma before you can choose it. There's a reason I chose this in my top 7 multi-class dedications, and that's because I think it's really strong. Oh, and FYI, I have done a Bard class guide. Check the link on screen or the description to learn more about the class and its cool feats if you like. As for this spellcaster archetype, like the others, it doesn't get a lot until you pump some feats into it, though you can get subclass abilities by taking the Multifarious Muse feat, meaning that aside from the standard scaling class features, you can get most things from the base class in this archetype. You can even get Courageous Anthem at level 8, which is one of the most powerful cantrips in the system in my opinion. And with it being spontaneous, you do gain a few signature spells as well, which is pretty nice. I think this is an immediate S tier. Courageous Anthem is just that good. So if you're after a spellcaster archetype with some great support options, this archetype is probably one of the best for that. Side note, yes, Bless is great, but Courageous Anthem doesn't cost a spell slot, is only 1 action, has a massive emanation from the get-go, and has easy subclass options to extend the duration for free. Bless is fine, I just think this is better. Fight me. The Champion dedication requires a +2 in strength and charisma. This archetype is well known to be very good indeed. You'll be forced to pick a deity and you'll be bound by the anathema once you take this dedication, etc. You get the champion aura, sanctification if need be, but the better part is becoming trained in light and medium armor, but if you're already trained in those, it's heavy armor. And this scales with your armor proficiency that you would get anyway. On top of that, there's champion resiliency, so long as you don't have more than 8 HP for your class per level, meaning that you can get extra health from just taking champion feats. You even get devotion spells such as Lay on Hands and Shields of the Spirit, and you can even grab the champion's reaction and a devout blessing, which is practically most of the things the main class actually gets. And like the Bard, outside of your scaling proficiencies and the like, you more or less get everything that the champion gets, sort of. This is definitely an immediate S tier. It's such a very strong archetype that it's hard to pass up on. And so if you want extra defenses and potentially some very interesting focus spells, you want to beef up your tanking abilities, maybe you should start grabbing the champion archetype. The Cleric dedication requires a +2 in Wisdom. Like the Champion, you're going to have to pick a deity and you're going to be bound by their anathema, and this is a spellcaster class archetype of course, though I personally think Cleric feats tend to be a little bit better than most other spellcasters. And there's quite a lot of things you can do with these feats to make them synergistic, like Deadly Simplicity is really cool, Restorative Strike, Emblazoned Armament, Channel Smite. Honestly, there's so many good feats in here. And sadly, you're never going to gain access to your Divine Font from this archetype, but because of all of the above, I'm going to throw this into A tier. I think it would have been B tier, but the really cool feats put it a little higher. So if you're interested in having divine spells and you want some of the cool cleric feats that are available for some potential synergy for your build, this has got to be your pick. The Commander dedication requires a +2 in Intelligence, something I sadly lack. I mentioned this in my top multi-class dedications video, and that's because some of the Commander feats are incredibly strong, though you'll never get your drilled reactions from the base class, which is the class feature that allows you to give back a reaction to an ally every turn, just bear that in mind. And sadly, you'll never gain access to the Expert Master and Legendary Tic Tacs. Still, it's an incredible archetype because some of the Commander feats, as I mentioned, are just ridiculously strong. My personal favorite being Plant Banner, as you just pop it down once a fight and then never even think about it again, and everyone within a 30-foot aura is going to gain a decent amount of temporary hit points every time they start their turn for nothing, or I guess for 1 action at the start of the fight. And there's a lot more feats in there that are fantastic. You can even have an animal companion wielding your banner, which is just hilarious and awesome. There's just some really interesting builds and synergies you can do with this archetype, probably too many to list. Oh, and Warfare Lore is just really good too, so I'm going A tier for this. If you're looking for some cool build ideas as well as being able to assist your ally allies in combat, so long as you don't mind them never getting back their reaction, this is a great archetype to pick. The Druid dedication requires a wisdom of +2. This one's a little bit more like a basic spellcaster dedication, but obviously it's primal spells. But this is somewhat like the Bard in that you can grab some of these subclass options by taking the Order spell feat at level 4, then you can grab Order Explorer later on and grab Order Magic for more subclass abilities. If you're after shape-shifting focus spell abilities, this archetype is great for that, and the Storm Order's focus spell Temper Surge is pretty delicious also. Aside from that, there's nothing all that crazy in here. I think this is a little bit more limited feat-wise than the Cleric, so because of that, I'm going to throw this into B tier. Pick the Druid archetype if you want some primal magic and maybe some cool feats, especially the shapeshifty ones, they're always fun. Exemplar requires either a +2 in strength or dexterity. I actually really do not like this dedication. It's rare and there's good reason for that, and it's a little bit overpowered in my opinion. Luckily, because it is rare, most GMs can just say, nope, you cannot take it. It's honestly just really powerful, and I included it in my top 7 multi-class dedications list for a reason. You can just grab one of the icons upon taking this dedication immediately and have a permanent passive effect, which is kind of crazy. You do miss out on having more than 2 icons to swap your spark between from the base class. Initially you only get one, but at level 12 you can take a second one, but still, because it's so powerful, I'm just throwing this straight into S tier. It's just way too good. If you're looking for a passive ability to make your build better in some way, take Exemplar, but make sure your GM's okay with it, and please come up with a good thematic roleplay reason. Don't just pick it for the mechanics. Don't be that guy. The Fighter dedication requires a +2 in strength and dexterity for reasons. Not sure why it's possible to play as a fighter without one of those attributes, but whatever. I really like this archetype. Not only does it have resiliency, you can also grab reactive strike from it. And I just think some of the fighter feats are just really cool. They are of course going to be martial focused, but they're just so much fun. Though you'll never get a +2 to your attack rolls due to proficiency with this archetype, because that would be crazy. As this video is rather long, I'm not going to go into detail on any of these feats. Feel free to check out my fighter class guide in the description and on screen now if you want more build ideas, or you can take a look through the feats yourself, but there's a bunch of awesome ones. But it kind of does exactly what you expect it to do because it is a fighter. So I'm going to throw this into A tier for being exactly as described on the tin, and by the tin I mean the book. Take this archetype if you want some cool martial feats. The Guardian Dead requires a +2 in strength and constitution. Taking this immediately gives you training in light, medium, or heavy armor, depending on what you had previously, and it does indeed scale similar to the champion. You also get the taunt action, which is going to be sporadically useful. Plus you get the similar Barbarian resiliency 10 HP thing, which is awesome. I love that one. You do miss out on the resistance to all physical damage from the base class in this archetype. You also get a worse version of intercept attack at level 6 because it only allows you to do it once every 10 minutes, which is a little bit rubbish, honestly. But you can take the armored resistance at 8 to increase your physical damage to half your character level when you use this intercept attack. So that's basically once a fight you get to reduce damage to an ally for a reaction and gain resistance against it, which is not terrible. Guardian does get some really awesome feats though. Honestly, the modern martial classes have some crazy powerful feats, and there's some really good build options here for you if you want to go a little bit tankier. I think this is going to be an A tier as well, just because you can get some action compression stuff for your taunt, so you can attack and taunt at the same time, which is pretty cool. Plus the feats are just honestly really strong. So if you're looking for some more tanky options, grab this dedication. The Gunslinger requires +2 in dexterity, and it is uncommon. Similar to the fighter, you're never going to gain your +2 with all crossbows and firearms by taking this archetype versus the base class, but you do gain training with them for whatever that's worth, and you do select a Gunslinger way. And at level 6, you can grab the initial deed for that way, which is decent but not amazing until you get to level 10, and then you can take the Slinger's reload for the way that you selected, which does indeed make this pretty cool. You're basically getting action compression for any reload actions by taking this archetype and getting it to level 10. Gunslinger does get a couple of really cool feats such as Fake Out and Risky Reloads. They're all pretty good. But there's nothing crazy strong in this archetype in my opinion, so let's go with B tier. If I was being entirely subjective, this would be C tier for me because I just hate reloading in PF2E, whether you have action compression or not. So if you're looking to give yourself some action compression for reloads and some cool ranged feats, take the Gunslinger archetype. The Inventor requires a +2 in Intelligence. I don't know why I said it like that. Inventor is also uncommon. This is one of those archetypes that's very good initially and then kind of trails off. I put it in my multi-class dedications video because I think it's one of the better ones if you immediately grab the Construct innovation, just because it's pretty strong early on. Again, as I said, this whole archetype kind of trails off later on, although you do get the Explode action at level 6 if you like, which is a pretty fun ability to have because it's save-based. That means no map, which is lovely. Plus, Inventor does get some pretty strong feats. There's just not a great deal of them, and pretty much all the good ones have the Unstable trait, which is a bit of a downside. And with this archetype, you're never going to get all the best modifications for your innovation. I believe you get 1 at level 8, and that is all. So I think I'm going to go with the top end of A tier for this one. If you're looking for a strong companion to grab for a single feat, and then a couple of extra unstable actions like Searing Restoration, for example, and maybe even Kerplode, grab the Inventor archetype. The Investigator requires a +2 in Intelligence. I'll be honest, this is probably the class I'm least familiar with in PF2E. However, Devise a Stratagem can be really cool, and you can grab that at level 4, though you're never able to use your Intelligence for it and all of the abilities that stem from it, which is the biggest L of this archetype from the base class. You can get Skill Mastery though for all the skills. So because it does seemingly have some pretty interesting feats and possible build synergies, we're just going to throw this into A tier because it reminds me of the Rogue, just not quite as good. So pick this if you want Devise a Stratagem and you want some extra feats, etc. The Kineticist dedication requires a +2 in Constitution, which basically everyone's going to have at some point. Versus the main class, this doesn't get the free Elemental Blast or Stance Impulse when you channel elements. You also have to take Improved Elemental Blast to have the damage scale a little bit better. If this one can be rather powerful depending on which element you pick and which kinetic feat you start grabbing at level 4, and that's because you can grab the Timber Sentinel ability then, and it will scale with you as if you were the full class. As a side note, I've actually had a player in one of my games say that he and his group deliberately all took the Kineticist dedication with Timber Sentinel to see how well it fared, and he basically said it ruined the balance. Because when everyone conjures one of these trees at the start of a fight and they intercept all the damage and there's basically no cooldown for it, it kind of wrecks encounters. I honestly think that Timber Sentinel should either be 3 actions or have the Overflow trait. I think it's just way too powerful from my experience GMing. But anyway, that's just one way to use Kineticist because it does get a bunch of really cool feats that you can take. It is very strong indeed. I'm personally just not a massive fan of it because it feels like one of those dedications that most people are going to take just because it's easy to grab, and there's a few passive auras and the like you can grab as well, which can just be like free damage or free debuffs every turn. I'm going to go for A tier for this because I'm just not a massive fan of it. I think you'd need some really good thematic choices for your character to make this work without it seeming like you're just grabbing it for extra damage or Timber Sentinel, etc. Grab this one if you want some passive aura nonsense or some really decent abilities. It can work for most classes, honestly, depending on which element you choose. The Magus, however you like to pronounce it, dedication requires +2 strength or dexterity and +2 intelligence. The biggest downside to Magus is you're not going to get to Spell Strike until level 4, and even then you can only do it once every minute. However, Spell Strike is rather strong, and you do gain some spells similar to the other spellcaster archetypes from taking this, though like the Magus, you're going to lose access to some of those ranks as you level up. It does get some decent feats, even Reactive Strike is in there, but nothing crazy powerful. If you treat the Magus archetype as a mini spellcaster with spell strike once per fight, it fares a bit better, but Vicious Swing is spammable in comparison, which certainly makes a once per battle spell strike seem kind of Boswellux. And as you do lose access to spell ranks as you level up, I think this is going to be a higher end of C tier for me. So take the Magus archetype if you're looking to spell strike once per fight and you want a few spells per day. The Monk requires a +2 in strength and dexterity. Initially, you're not really going to gain a great deal from this archetype, though you can grab resiliency if you have no more than 8 HP, and the main reason you'll probably get this is not only for Monk moves at level 8, which increases your movement speed when not wearing armor, but you can also grab Flurry of Blows, even though it's kind of rubbish now. They made it so that it only works once every 1d4 rounds, which is kind of a shame, and the biggest thing missing from the main class. You can grab Perfection's Path at 12 to increase one of your saving throws to Master, but the Monk feats are probably going to be the biggest reason to grab this, as there's a bunch of rather powerful ones in there, especially the key spells. If the Monk still had the Legacy Flurry of Blows, this would be A tier, but without it, I'm going to throw it into B tier. If you're looking to increase some of your defenses and take some really interesting key focus spells, that's what this archetype is for. Oracle requires a +2 in Charisma. Now, this is kind of similar to the Cleric archetype in a way because it's sort of a generic spellcaster, though there's some really awesome feats you can take with it. However, you do have the curse to deal with similar to the actual base class, though that's without the feat that comes with it. And some of the feats you're going to grab, which are probably going to be the more powerful ones, are going to be Cursebound, which is going to make your curse worse, or Cursor worser if you're a moron, like me. But you can grab your Revelation spell as well once you get to level 4, and honestly, some of the feats for Oracle, as already mentioned, are very strong indeed. Reach spell, Widen spell, Oracular Warning, Nudge the Scales, Whisper's Weakness. These are all very, very powerful feats to get for quite a lot of different builds. So I'm going to go with the top end of B tier for Oracle. It would have been A tier if not for the fact that you do have the curse to deal with versus something like Cleric, which doesn't. So if you're looking for another divine caster with a bunch of powerful feats, you can't go too wrong with Oracle. The Psychic Dedication requires a +2 in Intelligence or Charisma. And now, since my multi-class video, they changed Psychic to no longer get a focus point upon taking the Dedication. They also did a bunch of stuff to make amping spells worse, but I'm not going to get into that now because I'll start crying. You can get this point back though at level 6 by taking Psi Development, and unlike the other spellcaster dedications, you only get one cantrip with this archetype. However, it is the Psi cantrip, meaning that it should be slightly stronger than the default version. And again, once you get Psi Development, you can start to amp them with your focus points. Psi Development also gives you a second cantrip, and you can actually choose the unique psychic cantrip that no other classes can get, like Imaginary Weapon if you want, despite it being nerfed. No, we're not getting into that into this video, it's already long enough. FYI, you'll never be getting your subconscious mind and subsequent ability from this archetype, and some of them are really cool, like my personal favorite, Restore the Mind from Emotional Acceptance. I guess it makes sense as it's not the main class, I just hate losing out on extra heals. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to get Unleash Psyche either as the archetype, sadly. But this was one of those dedications that was really strong just because the initial dip gave you so much, and now it doesn't really do that anymore unless you want that more powerful cantrip and you want to be able to amp it. I don't really know how good this is to take anymore, honestly. You get some okay-ish feats, but nothing super interesting. I think this is more of a bottom end of B tier, as those side cantrips, especially amps, can be pretty cool. It's a big drop-off since my multi-class dedication video, sadly. Go for this if you want some occult spells, some kinda cool feats, and a stronger cantrip. A quick mini rant from me. I cannot believe they nerfed the Psychic and left the Exemplar as it is. I don't want to hear that it's rare. I think the Exemplar archetype should lose the passive imminence and only get the Transcendence actions until you take another feat at a certain level. If you're getting rid of the focus points from Psychic, come on, let's have some of these martial archetypes be nerfed too. I mean, aside from the Monk, that one still keeps me up at night. Ranger requires a +2 in Dexterity. Annoyingly, you'll never get your Hunter's Edge from this archetype ever, but a Ranger does get some good feats, including Animal Companion, Gravity Weapon, Far Shot, and I have a little thing going with Soothing Mist. I love me some Focus Heal spells. Overall, it's pretty solid for increasing your range capabilities. Just bear in mind, you're still going to need to hunt prey for some of your feats to work, and without your Hunter's Edge, it can feel a bit like it's stealing actions from you. Now, I'm going to go for B tier for this one, mostly for having solid feat selections, plus resiliency is here too. If not for Animal Companion and Soothing Mist, this would probably be C tier, but Dominic does love companions and heal spells, apparently. If you're looking to boost your range damage and the like, maybe grab a few cool focus spells, Ranger is one of the better archetypes for that. Ruji Rogue dedication requires a +2 dex to nab it. I mentioned this one in my top multi-class dedications video because it is incredibly strong, mostly because of all the feats that Rogue gets, which are some of the best feats in the entire system. Mobility alone, which can stop reactions from happening if you're going to move half your movement speed, is a passive, and it's just so freaking good. You can also grab Skill Mastery and start grabbing a bunch of extra skills and skill feats, and it's pretty crazy if that's your jam. And it gets a little version of Sneak Attack, which does a bit of extra damage. Doesn't scale all that well in comparison to the main class's version, but hey, it's still a bit of free extra damage, nothing wrong with that. And so Rogue is gonna go into S tier because it's just phenomenally good. Those feats are really some of the best in the whole system, if not the best class feats in the whole system. If you're looking for a bunch of extra skills, skill feats, and some of the best martial focused and maybe even non-martial feats in the whole system, Rogue is your thing. The Sorcerer dedication requires a +2 in Charisma. I don't know why I'm speaking weird. Honestly, this one is literally the spellcaster archetype. If you just want some extra spells in any of the 4 traditions and possibly a bloodline spell at some point, you take this dedication. It's very simplistic, but not all that complex, and there's not really a great deal more to say about it, as most of the feats that Sorcerer gets are kind of average spellcaster feats. The Reach spell is really nice, and you'll never get your blood magic effect from this archetype, though you can get a bloodline spell, but that's not the same thing. So So I'm just going to throw this into C tier and leave it there. If you want reach spell plus some basic spell casting, spontaneous styles, take this dedication, though I do think there's better ones out there for each spell casting tradition. Ruh-roh. This dedication requires a +2 in charisma. Right, I know what you're thinking. If you know anything about this channel, you'll know that I'm not the biggest summoner fan, but even with my perfectly reasonable problems with this class, the dedication is genuinely atrocious. It's actively and potentially disadvantageous to take this because you don't get any action compression from the base class, but your Eidolon still shares HP with you. This means that you now have 2 PCs on the field, and when you roll a save for an AoE, if you're both in there, you have to roll twice and take the lower result. And all for what? Like, what do you actually get from this? All I can think of is it's easier to heal you because there's 2 of you on the field now. That's all I've got. You literally never get tandem actions from this archetype, which means no act together ever. So what is the point? It's a straight up terrible archetype and honestly needs a massive rework, which we might get soon anyway if we're lucky with Impossible Magic. But until then, this is D tier. If you're looking to challenge yourself or alternatively screw yourself over, take the Summoner archetype. Swashy requires a +2 in charisma and dexterity. Alright, I'll stop speaking weird now. This one's kind of interesting in that I feel like it's got great flavor, but only mechanically is good for specific builds. Being able to get panache and stylish combatant is pretty cool, and this allows tumble through to trigger that panache as well, which is nice. Some of the swashbuckler feats are indeed rather fun, though mostly for martial classes. And once you get to level 4, you can get finishing precision, which is just basically a worse version of precise strike with less damage on it, the biggest loss from not being the main class itself. The basic finisher is kind of pants, but if you're going to do a strike, then it's still a little bit of extra damage. Plus, you can take others later with feats. You can also gain some of the extra swashbuckler speed when you have panache, which is really cool. Opportune riposte is potentially good to have if you don't have a reaction to use. This would have been C tier if not for some of the really fun feats you can take to make some builds. So let's go with the low end of B tier. If you're looking for a bit of extra movement, a teeny tiny bit of extra damage for your martial abilities, and some fun feats, plus an extra dose of flavor, take the Swashy archetype. The Thaumaturge dedication requires a charisma of +2. While the base class with its kickass implements is really cool, I think this archetype is kind of mid. While you do end up getting one of the implements, you don't gain any of its benefits. And you're not going to get esoteric lore, which means you're unable to use exploit vulnerability. You do get a weaker version called glimpse vulnerability that just makes them have weakness 2 against your unarmed and weapon strikes. From what I can tell, that doesn't scale though. And then weirdly enough, you skip the whole skill check thing from esoteric lore. This just works on all enemies. Obviously, Thaumaturge does get some pretty decent feats, but nothing crazy strong. I like Scroll Thaumaturge, for example, and Talisman Esoterica. Once you get to level 6, you are able to use your implement's initiate benefit, but that is it. Other than that, I just don't think this is all that strong. You do need a hand free usually to use most of this stuff, so we're going to go with C tier. Choose the Thaumaturge archetype if one of its implements looks like it'll benefit you quite well. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother with it. The Witch dedication is going to require +2 in intelligence. This archetype does immediately give you a familiar and 2 cantrips, which is good stuff, and by grabbing some of the lessons as witch feats, you can start grabbing hexes as well. You can even start nabbing some of the greater lessons when you get to level 12 and beyond. But you are going to miss out on some of the abilities that your familiar can do when you cast a hex spell. This means that this particular archetype is essentially a spellcaster with a familiar and some somewhat decent hex focus spells, not the hex cantrips, and that's kind of it really. It's not all that bad. Some of the familiar abilities can be really cool, and getting a familiar plus a couple of spells, even if they are just initial cantrips, is not bad for a single feat. I think I'm going to go for mid B tier for the Witch archetype. So if you're after a familiar and you want some spells and some somewhat interesting feats such as Cackle, which is a really good one, pick the Witch. Like the Witch, the Wizard dedication requires a +2 in intelligence. Similar to the Sorcerer, this is a pretty generic spellcaster archetype, but of course limited to the arcane tradition. You can grab your initial school spell at level 4, though you don't get to pick an arcane thesis for the archetype. And aside from that, like I said, it's pretty much the same as the other full spellcaster archetypes out there, along with some pretty solid spellcaster feats. This goes into the lower end of B tier for just being a solid spellcaster archetype. Oh, and a little note on spellcaster archetypes and how many spells you get. They all ultimately get the exact same amount of enough spells with the same feat investment, not including the Magus, Psychic, or Summoner. Just thought I'd mention that in case people wondered. And that is my tier list of all the multi-class archetypes currently released in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I'm going to finish up because this video has definitely gone on long enough. Thanks for sticking with it. Please consider subscribing and sharing this with a friend, and if you liked the video, please click on that like button, and please consider adding a comment about your favorite multi-class archetypes in this system, or any crazy builds you've come up with using them. I'd love to hear about them. I'd like to take a moment to thank my artist, Leandro Notado. Links are in the description to his really cool portfolio if you want some art commissioned. And then I'd like to take a moment to thank my members and archivists: Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Nikolai Milenkovic, Kyle Travis, Bentfair, Apteryx13, and patrons and archivists Clash, Q, and Patrick O'Donoghue. But for now, this is Dominic of the Nomicom, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.